Good morning, everyone. Yeah. So, yeah, well, close to 40 people. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Welcome to the webinar for EU member states in biodiversity and pollinator for policymakers and officials. So we are really glad to see you all of here. And well, I'm Cristina Sevilleja from Butterfly Conservation Europe and Dutch Butterfly Conservation, Vlinderstichting in Dutch. And I will be chairing this session. At the moment is recorded. So yeah, you can keep your camera out and the microphone, but later on the discussion part, we will stop the recording. So today we will have 3 presentations of butterfly monitoring and trying to explain you a bit what we are doing and why. First of all, I wanted to give the time to Andreas Wimberg to give some kind words about this meeting. Good morning, Andreas.
Yeah, good morning, Cristina, and thank you very much for giving me the floor. I'm Andreas Gumbert. I work in DG Environment in the Biodiversity unit, and in particular I'm working on the implementation of the EU Pollinator initiative. So, and in that sense, I'm very happy that we have this webinar here. So many thanks for BCE and colleagues to have organized it. And I'm also happy that we have quite some attendance here from participants. So it's about butterfly monitoring. So we know butterflies play a very important role in our ecosystems, and they provide a range of different ecosystem services, including pollination, of course. On which many plants rely. At the same time, butterflies are also sensitive to environmental change. So that makes them a very good indicator of the health of the environment. And we can only protect what we know. So we have to monitor the status of butterflies. They're really very good indicators. And luckily, as a result of the activities of BCE and others, we have the eBMS, the European Butterfly Monitoring Scheme, which is a remarkable monitoring scheme, because it is basically, together with bird monitoring, the only harmonized monitoring scheme of biodiversity that is stretching over long periods of time. Back in history, I think it started in 1991, from this eBMS activity, there is also an indicator, the Grassland butterfly indicator, which is calculated on an annual basis at EU level. So the Commission is currently supporting the calculation of this GBI for until 2026. So we have the so-called Embrace project that is financing this activity and supporting this work. These data are extremely useful to assess the status and the trends of butterflies and as also basically as an indicator for biodiversity as a whole in the EU. So we use the GBI to assess progress in relation to the implementation of the EU biodiversity strategy. It's also been used for assessing progress on. This is one of the indicators to assess progress on the Sustainable Development Goals, and maybe even the most important aspect, for at least for EU legislation, is that the GBI has now been included into the Nature Restoration Regulation. So it is one of the eligible indicators that member states can use to demonstrate progress in the restoration of in agriculture ecosystems. But of course, a precondition for using this indicator is that it is available at the national level. So I was mentioning the Embrace project. So the Commission is financing or supporting the calculation of the indicator at the European level. But this is, but we do not have in all the member states national indicators calculated. And I hope that with this webinar, we can raise interest and on using this indicator more widely, and can convince authorities to be in those member states where this is not yet the case, convince authorities to be a bit more active in this support, that would enable basically calculation of the indicator in all countries. Maybe I stop here. So thank you very much. Don't want to take too much of the time. So thank you very much for organizing the webinar, and I wish us all a very interesting discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andreas. It was really great. Welcome people that are still joining. We are got close to 60 people, so really nice. Thank you so much for joining and for your words also, Andreas. So now we will start with the agenda with the first presentation from Chris van Swaay from Dutch Butterfly Conservation. Hi, Chris.
Hi. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. If it goes well. Like always, you never know for sure.
Yeah, you don't never know with technologies.
If it works.
Okay.
You should see, and now I should start the presentation.
Now is okay. Yeah.
Is okay?
Go ahead, Chris.
Great, thank you. Yeah, so a short overview of what we're going to talk about today. So Andreas, you have already heard. I will give a short introduction to the GBI and butterfly monitoring. Also after that, Reto Schmucki from UKCEH will tell us something about the Grassland butterfly index in more detail. And Cristina will talk about capacity building. And after that, we can have questions and discussion. If you have, after each talk, there is a short room for discussion immediately on the talk. So we are doing this in the Embrace project. Embrace is a project which is, like Andreas already told us, financed by the European Union. Vlinderstichting, so Dutch Butterfly Conservation, is the main contractor, but we work closely together with UKCEH, the Centre for Ecology and Hydrology, Butterfly Conservation UK, and with BCE, Butterfly Conservation Europe. And eBMS is our central place where all the data comes together. The European Butterfly Monitoring Scheme, as it's called, is a central database in which all the data comes together, and we can calculate the EU or European GBI. So Embrace is all about butterfly monitoring. And butterfly monitoring is actually quite old, because this is the first paper which started all the butterfly monitoring, and which goes back to 1973 and shows already that in that time there was in the UK a need for a reliable method of recording the abundance of butterflies in nature reserves, but also outside, to be able to monitor changes from year to year. So it started the butterfly monitoring itself in 1976 in the UK. And the main idea is that you have repeated transit counts of butterflies to species level, and you follow a protocol. That means that we know exactly what you see and what you don't see. You do it all at the same time with the same minimum requirements for weather, and you count the same type of transit, the same width and what you count. Most of the counts so far are done by volunteers, expert volunteers, so it's a citizen science project, although part of the transects are also done by professionals, for example, in nature reserves. And Reto will show that we have many sites, but the numbers are still growing. The huge advantage of the method is that it's scalable. So we can look at it in all kinds of ways. We can look at it very local. How are the butterflies on my transect or in my nature reserve doing compared to others? You can scale it up to regional, get national trends, and even continental or global trends. And there have been a huge amount of publications. So this is really a golden standard used all over the world. And there are lots of scientific publications based on this method. So it's a proven method which has been tested, and we know that it works. So the footwork is a transect method. So you walk a standard transect, often divided into smaller sections because of practical reasons. In the old days, you had to write down what you had seen on your first 50 meter or so. Nowadays, most of the recording is done by apps, but we still use the same sections in most transects. They are everywhere in Europe, though the biggest concentrations are in the countries which started the monitoring, which is in the UK, and after that the Netherlands, Catalonia, and parts of Finland, and after that it spread all over Europe. And it's based. Our monitoring is based on national or sometimes regional coordinators who collect accounts, validate accounts. So we have to be sure that everything is correct. They can already calculate national trends and indicators, and they lead their data to the central database, the eBMS, and there we can use it to calculate trends, for example, for the EU or Europe. Embrace is a project in which we want to further extend the eBMS network and support BMS coordinators. So we had a workshop on 2 April, so in spring this year, where we discussed how they can learn to do all these things themselves as well, because also some data analysis, etc., is needed. We also want to work on capacity building, so extend the network, get more people joining for butterfly monitoring. And of course, we calculate the Grassland Butterfly Index on a EU and European level. So this GBI is a very old indicator. It consists of 17 characteristic grassland butterfly species, both specialist and widespread species. We started in 2005, which was the first version developed by Arco van Strien from Statistics Netherlands and me on first trial on what we could do on a European level with grass butterflies. After that, we had regular updates. Able, Spring, and Embrace were 3 EU projects, and we were able to update the indicators and improve on the quality and extend the eBMS network. So some of the results of national results or regional results, for example, this is the GBI for the Netherlands, but it's also there for Flanders, which actually looks a lot like the Dutch one. We have it for Catalonia, which is the blue line, which you also can see that there is a decline of about 50% in Catalonia. And Luxembourg, it's more or less stable. And in Germany, statistically, there is a small decline, but actually it's not by far as bad as, for example, in the Netherlands or Flanders or Catalonia. So in the last update we did this spring of the GBI, you can see that both in EU and in Europe the decline is more or less similar, and we see it's about 50% less of the grassland butterflies than we had around 1990. Reasons are, for example, intensification. You see to the right, to the left, what grasslands in the Netherlands originally looked like. And so nowadays they are nature reserves, but this used to be the standard grassland in the Netherlands. To the right, you see nowadays the present grassland, agricultural grass in the Netherlands. And it's not just that these have changed a lot, but what you also see is, of course, that the grasslands to the right, they influence the grasslands to the left. So nature reserves are influenced by all kinds of things, by the treatment on intensive agricultural grasslands. Another main reason is abandonment, especially in parts of southern and eastern Europe. We see abandonment of grasslands. This used to be a grassland. Now you see lots of shrubs and trees coming up. And it's only a matter of time before a grass like this, which was very rich in butterflies, will become a secondary forest. Sadly, these secondary forests are in the beginning quite poor in butterflies. Old forests can be good in butterflies, but young forests not so much. So this is a threat for these very rich grasslands, as in this case. And it's also a good that it's very well possible to change the trend of the GBI, the national trend. So what you anyway need is good monitoring. So Cristina will tell more about that, but you have to promote and support your national BMS network. The more data you have, the better informed you are on the quality of your grasslands. It's actually also possible to use the EUPOMS butterfly transect results because the field method is the same. They won't be enough on itself because you will for sure miss many of the specialist species, as the method to choose the EUPOMS site is a stratified sample of your country, which means that many of them will not be on sites with specialist species. You can also work on improvement of the quality of grasslands and road verges in the wider countrysides. This will also be very positive for all the other pollinators in the other article of the nature restoration regulation. For example, by good management of such areas. So this can be small flower strips along fields. These can be like here, where the intensive grassland is bordered by a relatively flower-rich edge, which can be important for butterflies. Road verges, I mean, this is in fact a sand road in between mice fields, but a flower-rich strip can mean an important place for butterflies to survive. And of course, we also have to be very careful. This is a photo of, well, it's in Dutch, but that's why I translated. Here they said, do not mow because of protected species. But I notice often that for the people who have been trained for generations to just mow everything, it's virtually impossible to not mow such an area, or not mow, or mow it in a different way, or be more precise. And that even leads to small disasters as this one. This is a spot in the Netherlands where Macularia nausitaus occurred, which is also one of the species of the GBI. And this species was literally mown away by, even though we did everything we could to stop the mowing, but it simply went wrong. And the species is now vanished, disappeared from the Netherlands since 2 years. Of course, this means that for this species, the index of this species goes to 0. So this has a very negative effect on your GBI. And of course, for specialists, many of the specialists occur in grasslands and nature reserves. And also there, it's important to think of the quality from a butterfly point of view. Many of these grasslands are managed from a botanical point of view. And sometimes they have this works out very well, but not always. Especially, for example, there's an example where this is in Germany, where an area with really special butterflies, because this is the sign next to it, showing that it was an important area for butterflies, Tagfalter. And parts of the nature reserves were like this, and actually we even saw one of the specialist species on this grassland. But other parts look like this, and this is heavily overgrazed by sheep, and you see no flowers. This was almost no butterflies at all still present. And these things also happen. I think they mean well, but at the end, for butterflies, this was a disaster. So you will hear more about all these things in the next two talks by Reto on the GBI and by Cristina on capacity building and other things. This is the Embrace timeline, very short. We already had a workshop for BMS coordinators in which they could learn how to calculate trends and the GBI for their country themselves. We already produced a GBI report for the GBI up to 23 in May. Ongoing work, which we do all the time, is to support the national BMS, the national butterfly monitoring schemes. We go on with capacity building and supporting the national GBIs, helping people to produce them. And in December, we will produce an update of the GBI up to 24, and December next year, an update up to 25. And from this moment on, we have the capacity. We built a framework in which we can update the GBI for EU and Europe annually within a year after the year has ended. So that's my talk. If there are questions, we can direct questions on this topic. So really GBI questions is maybe better to wait for the talk from Reto, which will come afterwards, although I probably can answer them as well. But okay.
Thank you so much, Chris. Really nice talk and description. I don't see any question on the chat and not any hand. I don't know if there is any doubt so far. Maybe later when we get in deeper and deeper on the topic. Well, yeah, thank you, Chris. It was really nice. Later we continue. Let's see more questions. So now is the moment for Reto Schmucki from UKCEH, from Center of Ecology and Hydrology from the UK. Reto, you can share your...
Hi, thank you. Thank you,
Hello.
Cristina, and thank you, Chris. I'm just going to share it now. I think you see, I will put that in presentation mode.
Yeah, I can see
We
your
are.
screen.
Okay. Everything is on?
Yeah, now we can see it well. Thank you.
Excellent. It's always a pleasure, and thank you for the funding of this project, and it's always for the organization also of this this workshop or engagement activity with to spread the news of what's going on with the eBMS and with the Grassland indicator. And it's always nice to follow an introduction by Chris, who really advocate very well how the importance of Grassland butterfly indicator, but also of the eBMS and butterfly monitoring. So in this talk, I will not go again over all the importance of butterfly, but more go into the detail of how we collect the data and how we calculate the butterfly, the Grassland indicator. And again, I will not go into that deep detail, but I'm happy to answer a question. I will keep it as accessible as possible to just inform about the big concept. So to talk about quality assurance of the data, but also how we calculate and how we cope with some challenge that comes with butterfly data. So as Chris mentioned, the eBMS and the database that we put together thanks to all the coordinator and the volunteer across Europe is growing. It's growing massively since the 2010, where several other countries have joined after the initial countries such as the UK, Netherlands, Catalonia, Finland, and Belgium started. You see the number across Europe. Still outside Europe, outside the EU, there's also a lot of data that are collected, and they keep growing. And I think it's important to account for that too, because they are actually informing about the condition and the situation of butterfly outside the European Commission or the member state, and you can borrow strength from them. And it's also important contribution to take account of these So what is the Grassland, the eBMS? It's a national database or not a national database. It's a collation of national database where national expert and volunteer are collecting data, and it's essentially a network of expert where we have developed butterfly count app, so application and tools to collect the data. These data are then stored on an online system, and these data are also augmented in a centralized database where we have systematic quality check, there's taxonomic harmonization, date harmonization, spatial harmonization, consistency in the data type, and also unique ID. So we can always go back and inform national scheme that we detected maybe inconsistency here and there. So there's a real exchange with national database and data coordinator. So where we do a check at where we benefit from the check at the national level, we also can feedback and improve quality at both sides from the bottom up to the top down also. And there's obviously traceability of the origin data source just to enable that. The eBMS collect data across Europe, but it's also collecting data across landscape and land use. So there is a lot that is collected in arable land, pasture, and forest, but also in urban fabric, so around city and town where people live, scrub and artificial and non-agricultural vegetation. So we cover not exactly the same proportion of land, but we cover most of them and not so far off the real representation of the land use across Europe. So butterfly are really important, and it's actually quite a good time because as we expanded those network, there's also more interest in what's going on with butterfly. And the Grassland butterfly indicator, as Chris mentioned, it's an indicator of 17 species, 17 specialist habitat species attached to associate with grassland. So there's widespread species, 7 of them, and then there's also highly specialist species that are really using and restricted or not restricted, but very closely attached to those habitat. And we use all these data to inform a change in abundance of these 17 species. And they are locally recorded at multiple times over multiple years, for several years. And then we model them using the integrated information to understand when and where individuals have been observed and monitored. And that really allows us to really get good population trend. And also with the amount of data and the growth of the eBMS, we really reduce the bias attached to the original, to the sample size or the data collected. This allows us to produce the Grassland indicator, and there's a report that are going back in time of this, and the latest being produced last spring with the EU 27 Grassland indicator that you see on your right-hand side. And these grassland indicator are also part of the Eurostat dashboard that you can find there. So it's an official statistic that is presented there. What is important to think about is that this grassland indicator is not a one-person effort, or it's not Chris and me and few, but we are about 56 organizations and that are working on this. So it's really a common effort and share effort from the data collection. And we don't even think about all the volunteers, the 1,000 volunteers that are behind this also. But all the coordinators are part of this effort. I think it's important to acknowledge that too. There's opportunity, but there's also challenge when we collect data and we analyze these butterfly data to get a reliable indicator. One of the challenge is that butterfly don't fly all the time. And we are missing some of these data due to weather, but also because we depend on volunteer. Some volunteer might not always be able to visit their site and do a collection or monitoring of all the species. So we have data that are relatively good, but we still have some missing date sometimes, so we don't have a weekly count on everything. However, due to the shared effort and the network, we can actually compensate and actually predict or impute value statistically for those missing points. So if we had only one transect or one place where we had missing count, we could actually not fix that issue or account for those missing count. However, within a network, we can use and we can borrow strength in what's happening next door or nearby to actually feed in and impute value that would be expected, that are likely to happen in those sites where visits have been missing. So this is what we have to do, and we can then calculate a phenology and use that phenology and that information about the biology of a species to impute those count, and then retrace and fix those bias attached to the sampling or imperfect sampling to get a better indicator and understanding of what's going on locally and also at the national scale and at the Europe. So these abundance indices are calculated locally, but these flight curve and the phenology that are used, where we borrow strength from multiple sites, are calculated at a biogeographic region that we have here. So we calculate flight curve, and then we impute value or expected value for local missing point to allow us to have a time series that is complete. And then we can calculate a abundance value for each year for each site across country. So each of these sites can then be completed with the real count and the statistically imputed using information from the local and the adjacent site to get a good understanding of what's going on in that site for that species in that given year. Once we have these completed and corrected time series, we can then collate an annual index for countries level, such as France, Switzerland, or Spain, or Netherlands, or Belgium, whatever. And then we have these national indicator of each species, so 17 species for the grassland indicator, that we can then merge together. However, merging different countries together requires a little bit of weighting because species are not distributed evenly everywhere. So we have very common species like this one that is covering almost all Europe. Then we have other species that are more distributed in the south of Europe. And then the contribution of some country should be reduced to the total global trend, or not global, but the European trend for this species. So we use the real range of each species and use that in the weighting to the contribution of the grassland indicator of the integrated trend. And then we have these 17 species. Here I only present 3 of them in the graph to not make a mess out of it. And then we aggregate these 17 species trend into one common trend with confidence interval to produce the grassland butterfly indicator that you see on the Eurostat dashboard, but also in the report. And these can be done at the European level, but it can obviously also be done at the national scale. This is all due because there's effort, there's network, there's tools that have been developed, there's capacity that are available on the web. There's capacity that are available nationally through national coordinator and network of volunteers. So this allows us to really have an eBMS and a good data set across Europe that is growing, and it's really good value for money because here we focus on 17 species for the grassland indicator, but we collect data for all the species. So can be indicator for woodland and many others. But here, definitely we make the best use of it for the grassland indicator. Thank Thanks.
Thank you, Reto. Was really well explained, the grassland butterfly indicator. I hope everyone got it. If there is any question direct about that indicator, now is the moment to put it on the chat or your hand. And if not, we could ask him later in the discussions, in the general discussion. But thank you so much, Reto. It was really well explained. So now is my time, the last presentation. I'm going to start sharing my screen. I think you can see it, and then I put it on presentation mode. Okay, so now is my time. I'm going to talk about more about the network itself. How do we grow and maintain the European butterfly monitoring schemes? My colleagues has been talking about the collection of data and the calculation of the indicators. And now, yeah, let's talk more about the people that is behind on that. So, well, Chris already mentioned this started in the butterfly monitoring scheme. The first one was done in the UK by Ernie Pollard, by this man in the 70s who defined the rules of how to monitor butterflies in a fixed route that you visited frequently. So he established the first transect, and then that populated to the whole country, and then that system of monitoring butterfly was extrapolated to many other countries where volunteers were trained on identifying butterflies, and that was supervised by expert coordinators, right? So that is how everything started, the methodology, and why butterflies were selected is because they are good indicators for several characteristics. They have a short life because they are insects, and they have even the complete cycle of life in 1 year. So they have several stages, and they can respond rapidly to changes in the habitat conditions and climate. So then we could see if there are changes in their population or in the numbers. Sorry. They have been investigating butterflies for a really, really long time. So we know a lot about their biology, ecology, and the whole distribution. So compared to other pollinators that could be better indicators, we know a lot about butterflies. They are easy to observe, and it's possible to train on the identification, and also they have a great popularity in the society, so that could help us to involve citizens, no, to record butterflies. This was shown several times, this map. This is our last update of the database up to 2023, where you could see all the transects, and well, just to remind how important and the huge effort that is behind, I showed you here some numbers of the eBMS database, where we are collecting many records, more than 50,000 transects, millions of visits, and in total there are 34 butterfly monitoring schemes in 30 countries. So we are covering the whole EU and also the whole continent, not all the countries, but we are getting close, and we are recording a huge number of species. So we could say that we are the biggest systematic database of insects in the world, that there are systematically and centralized collection of data on insects, no? In this case, butterflies. So well, also that we are growing a lot during all the years. We are increasing more and more the numbers of sites, transect that they are recording. And the great thing is we are sharing the same methodology of monitoring butterflies, so we can be able to compare between schemes and countries. And well, it's growing so fast, and you could see how many institutions, there are even more from those, that are creating this network of collecting data. How all of this started, I wanted to put you a little bit on the context. This was thanks of funding, no? So this is, okay, it's volunteers, free working for us, but there is a whole coordination behind that has to be funded, no? So thanks to several EU funding projects, we are able to go and bring further this network. We started with ABLE, this project in 2018, and where you could see we established and managed to get part of eBMS, the countries that you see in orange. Later in the years, with the project of Spring focused more on pollinators, we managed to get on board the remaining EU countries that you can see in gray. And well, thanks to that funding, we were able to really grow the number of chances, no? So you could really see how many more colors. That means more countries are joining and increasing the number of chances year by year. So that is more or less the current situation. We have a really robust network of butterfly monitoring in the 27 EU member states, also outside of the EU, you could see in gray. But of course, there are different levels of the status of those schemes, no? So I put it in different tones of purple how these countries are at the moment. So in darker purple, you could see that there are the most old and stable schemes that have been monitoring butterflies for even decades. And they have normally supported by their institutions of government. They are funding the coordination and the whole scheme, no? So they are able to monitor more and to provide useful and great data. And with that, all of that data, they are able to generate the trends, the reports, papers, because the data collected is really, really high. On the other hand, we have countries that are in progress. So you could see in the middle of Europe, more to eastern, in progress or starting, that they are just starting with a few transects. So they have just a few years of monitoring. The coordination is mainly volunteer, so it's not pay for that coordination. He's doing it in this free time. They are maybe part of a museum, institution, university, but some of his free time is dedicated to this coordination. All of these countries, they don't have direct national or government funding, so that is the case in the majority that they are in that situation. And the problem is that these schemes are vulnerable, no? They can collapse suddenly because, they are dependent on maybe one person or a few people, so they really need to increase their capacity. So for that, the project that we are talking today, Embrace, the new EU funding project we are working at the moment, we focus specifically on those countries to help them to increase the capacity. How this eBMS network is really robust and connected. We have a whole European coordination, and this was fed by the Butterfly Conservation Europe partners. So these are experts from each European countries belong to BCE. And thanks to that, we were able to also get the coordinators from the different countries. We have a close relationship and trust, so that is allowing us to enhance the butterfly community, to grow the speciality. And well, at the end, we have a really diverse and great network. We are supporting the new schemes, so all of these countries are starting the schemes. We try to support them from eBMS and help them to develop more the monitoring in their countries. We are getting the knowledge from all their schemes, so we have, as I told you, schemes with several decades that there are, that there are providing us a lot of knowledge on how they are doing it for so many years, how they produce the trends and retain volunteers. the work of a national coordinator. I wanted to explain it because behind of all of these numbers is a lot of institutions and colleagues behind working. So I wanted to explain that this is a lot of work, and we need to thank all our coordinators because they are doing a huge effort or recruitment and training of volunteers. They need to help on the collection of data, so help the volunteers on design the transit, to train on the identification and also on the tools, how to collect data. Once the data is collected, they need to do a verification, they need to submit that data to eBMS, calculate the annual report and even the trends and indicators if they can. And of course, this is a volunteer network and community, so you need to give feedback to all of them, to the institutions, stakeholders, to keep in the loop and to keep them updated. And of course, to maintain the community, no? So make events, keep the communication, and support that community. And I just want to remark that from that map of Europe, the majority of our coordinators are doing this work on a voluntary basis, so they are not paid to do all this work. I wanted to remark that the citizen science is a really useful system of monitoring data. It's true that they select the transit. We normally tell them to do it close to their house or work, so we increase the frequency of visits per year. If we have the volunteers monitoring butterflies close to their house, they could collect 10 or even more times per year. We have places where they collect it even 30 times in a year, visiting the same transit. So that is a lot of data and a lot of effort that, it will be difficult to pay, for do all of that effort. They record always in the same place, so they get familiarized with the environment. They understand the species, the changes, so they are experts of that site. The coordinators are helping them, of course, in the supervision, providing materials and encouragement. But at the end, they belong to a community, no? So the volunteers are attached to the community, to the nature, and they understand the need to protection, and they can even tell you if things are happening on the area. From our side, from eBMS, we try to support the whole system, so supporting the coordinator and at the same time the volunteers. We provide the tools for gathering data. We have a website and an app that we are improving constantly with the European projects. We do the verification, we are helping on that, and of course we do the statistical quality control, as Reto was explaining, and also the calculation of the EU indicators. So all of that, my final message, or really most important message, is that this system is really cost effective. We have a huge amount of people, volunteers working, monitoring transit and paid, that they are doing several times per year. I remind here the numbers of transit. We have more than 15,000 transects and more than 3,000 in 10 years of data recording during 10 years. So it's a huge amount of data. So the money invested to supporting the scheme, so to pay a coordinator for managing and coordinating the schemes is really well invested, and at the end is a pyramidal monitoring structure. No, we are paying a coordinator or a team, and those are coordinating many more people that there are directly on the field monitoring data. In the long established schemes, we can provide that is really effective structure, and they have a team full of skilled people with different tasks. And that is adding a lot of value from volunteers, because they are providing data in a really long term, and also they are monitoring to continue counting butterflies that there is not dependent on money. So if we finish the money of the project, they will continue counting butterflies in the field. And if we need to reproduce the same numbers of 15,000 transits, paying people to go and visit with the same rate, it will be, I don't know, insanely expensive, no, to cover all of that. And just to finalize, I wanted to say from data to policy. My colleagues already mentioned that, but yeah, thanks to eBMS collecting a lot of robust data, we can provide the butterfly trends that help us to calculate the indicators, because we are collecting data of butterflies until species level. So we know the diversity of species, but also the abundances of those species. We are monitoring butterflies in the whole season. So that is more or less between April, September, or even longer in Mediterranean countries. And yeah, we are cover adult butterflies. So when they emerge, and we can get the whole peak of the flying period of these animals. And with that, yeah, we can produce this long-term series of database with standardized basis. So just remember that the whole methodology is always the same. And all of this data is really useful for scientific research and also for understanding more the environmental changes. We are contributing to European and international commitments on biodiversity. So, for example, for the Habitat Directive or the Habitat of the Article 17, we could do with our data the assessment of the listed butterflies. We are just just published the butterfly red list this year from the IUCN, and that is using eBMS data for the assessments of the species. We are able to do the evaluation of effectiveness of agricultural incentives, so the changes in those areas. We can calculate and assess the site and species management and evaluation of restoration measures, and also reporting to the EU and CBD on biodiversity and the sustainable development goals. So here I put you the example of the life on land, the 15 goal on biodiversity, butterflies, the GBI, the Grassland Butterfly Indicator, is used together with birds, the only animals that are included in this goal. So it's a really great achievement. In regards to the benefits to the population and the society, I think I explained it already, but make it a remind that even in the nature restoration regulation in the Article 10 is mentioned that the promotion of citizen science in the collection and the monitoring data, but of course, based on provide adequate resources, no? So it's necessary, even if citizen science doesn't mean that it's completely free. So we need to invest on that effective collection of data. Butterflies are easy to identify, and we are able to provide really great results, as we explained you. And well, we have these butterfly monitoring volunteers, can be a pool of expert parataxonomies for the implementation of the European Pollinator Monitoring Scheme. So we have all this data and people that are already trained on butterfly identification. Of course, we have room for improvement. We have still some remaining challenges, so we need still to security more support from the member states to our coordinators and to the schemes to maintain them in a long term. Also retaining volunteers, that is a constant work that we need to do even in the really old scheme. That is a task to do repeatedly. We need to increase the number of transits across the whole member state and also habitats. Reto mentioned all the habitat that we are covering, so we could be more equivalent in the different habitats. And well, try to use more these butterfly count results, no? So that can be used more in the research and in order by other stakeholders to support the recovery of wild pollinator. So I hope the home message you get it is that eBMS has long-term monitoring data, and that is robust and with high quality. Thank you so much for listening and for being here today. We were close to 90 people, so it was really, really great. Thank you so much. I stop sharing here, and if is there any question, my colleagues come to the table. Yeah.